everybody. Good afternoon. Welcome to this webinar on how much does a greenhouse cost. My name is Keith Bemmer. I'm inside sales for Prospient. Joining me today is three of my esteemed colleagues: Paul Golden, our national sales manager; Jeff Smesmo, our Midwest sales manager; and Jerry Bleckley, our Southeast sales manager. And we are going to discuss this topic and just a little bit of background. Prospient is comprised of three manufacturing facilities consisting of Nexus Greenhouse Systems based out of North Glen, Colorado, Rao Brothers Incorporated, which was based out of Cincinnati, Ohio, and Thermo Energy that is based out of Kingsville, Ontario, Canada. Each of our facilities is capable of producing about an acre of greenhouses per week, which is pretty impressive. And going on that, I'd like to introduce our three people, and let's get going on. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me this afternoon. And Paul, if you don't mind, take it away.
Okay. Well, my name is Paul Golden. I'm the Director of Sales for Prospient. I've sold greenhouses everywhere from the Rocky Mountains west. We have a pretty good representation today of everyone across, well, not everyone we have across North America. We have 9 outside reps in North America, but we're pretty much covering the entire territory of this U.S. states right now. For the most part, we have Jeff Smesmo, who's an lifelong industry insider, and he's been selling greenhouses and equipment primarily in the upper Midwest. And then we have Jerry Bleckley, who's been with us for over 35 years now, and he covers the Southeast territory. He's built one of every type of greenhouse you can imagine. And so today, we're going to go over our agenda here. I want to talk a little bit about the factors to consider. I want to talk about implementing a budget for your greenhouse, and then also identifying and mitigating hidden cost, as well as cost comparisons across the board. So for any of you who aren't familiar with Prospient, you might want to go to our website and check it out, www.prospient.com. If you go there and you look under the different industries that we serve the institutional markets, we serve the mass retail markets, all the Lowe's, Home Depots, Walmarts of the world, Tractor Supplies. And then we also serve the floriculture industry in both the retail, wholesale, in both the retail and wholesale sectors. And today's focus is primarily going to be around the commercial business, which is primarily floriculture, wholesale, retail, and then a little bit of R&D in there every once in a while. We also serve all the institutional markets in a separate division for universities, botanical gardens, and whatnot. But we're not going to get into those types of structures today. We're primarily talking around commercial structures. And as I mentioned, if you go to our website, you'll see all these different industries that we serve. If you go to the floriculture and nursery page, you'll notice that we have 12 different greenhouse options available to that market. You might say, geez, I thought greenhouse was a greenhouse, but it turns out that each one of our structures really has a unique purpose for either the climate or the type of crop that's being grown. So, one of the first things we do when we talk to customers, we really try to dial in on what they're trying to do with the greenhouse before presenting a budget, because the options, the available options to you can vary in cost and complexity for sure. So there's no such thing as a kit style greenhouse. I'm going to kind of start with that. It's not a one size fits all. We even though a greenhouse might look just the same, as one greenhouse we build might look just the same from the outside as another greenhouse, the reality is there's a lot of different things that go into those. So there's it's going to depend on. The price is going to depend on the type of greenhouse that you're looking at, whether it's a simple ground to ground or all the way up to a very high end gutter connected glass structure. Then I would also say the biggest differences that I see in the industry is really not in the. I'm getting an echo feedback here. Yeah. The biggest differences I see in the industry are really not in the material cost so much as it is the built cost. The material cost from one manufacturer to another are actually usually pretty similar. The overall built cost is something that you have to think of when you're talking about building a new greenhouse project. And so, the build cost can vary so much, whether you're talking about a ground-to-ground structure or whether you're talking about a nice gutter connected either floriculture, wholesale, or retail project, or a produce job, because that would actually kind of some of the produce projects we actually consider in a commercial market as well, or an R&D type of project for commercial use. So the type of project that you're going to build will actually have a huge impact on the cost. The other big difference that you'll see is the scale. So the big areas for economy of scale are going to be in, first of all, manufacturing efficiencies. Second of all, in labor efficiencies for construction. So a bigger project usually tends to be less costly in terms of labor when you look at it from $1 per square foot, $1 per acre sense versus a smaller project, just because you're able to use the same pieces of equipment, which is your telehandlers and your scissor lifts, and you got a guy out there with a loader excavating. He's doing that for the entire site versus doing it for a real tiny footprint. So usually you see some major economy of scales there. And then lastly, you also see economy of scales when it comes to the freight. Building a small project, freight-wise, can oftentimes cost just as much as building a big project, especially if we have materials coming from all over the country, or possibly even equipment coming from overseas. So, it costs just as much to ship a little tiny bit of glass from overseas as it would be a full container, for example. So again, the three main factors are going to be the type and the size. I'd say lastly, the engineering requirements. That's going to be a huge impact on the cost of a greenhouse. If you can get some folks are lucky enough to get away with building greenhouses as simply an ag building, and others need to go out and get permits. And so the type of use for the greenhouse will often dictate whether you need full permits and a bunch of engineering in order to meet those permit requirements, or if you are simply just building an ag structure for production. Oftentimes you can sidestep all those requirements, and that has a huge cost impact on a project at the end of the day. Jerry, I think I'm hearing your papers possibly. Some of the papers.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay, buddy. That's okay. So as I mentioned, almost no two greenhouses that we build are alike. I'm going to show you some examples here in the next slide. But I would say that, Keith, would you mind advancing the slides?
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, thank you.
Also, just before we start, if anybody's got any questions during our presentation here today, feel free to type them in the chat. Any of us will be glad to answer them for you. So I'll be moderating those questions, but feel free to ask any questions you'd like. But Paul, sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
No, by all means, absolutely. We'd love to see some feedback. Like I said, almost no two greenhouses are alike. They might look identical from the outside, but depending on where we're locating them and all the building requirements, we might have completely different types of steel in terms of whether it's pre-galvanized or hot dip galvanized steel. We might have different thicknesses of steel. We might have different spacings in the trusses and columns to account for the different loading. So even though they all might kind of look alike, there's no two greenhouses that are identical, I'd say, with the exception of when we go ahead and gutter connect and expand on an existing project. Then oftentimes it's truly the same as what it was before. But two greenhouses we build maybe just 3 or 4 or 5 miles apart might look differently, it might have different materials in them, different thickness of steel because of the different building requirements, especially where I'm located up here in the mountain states.
And some of those changes could be like curved trusses, powder coated structures, heights, anything like that too, right, Paul?
Exactly. Of course, the height of the structure greatly depends on the type of ventilation that you're going to do inside of it. Oftentimes, taller structures are usually passively ventilated. Shorter structures are usually mechanically ventilated. So the height's going to impact the cost, just not only in steel, but also in coverings, and may even impact the cost with the climate control equipment. So those factors have a huge impact on it. I'll say that the next biggest thing I would say for cost variability in a project would be who's actually going to build the thing. Are you going to have a GC and an architect involved to design this facility and get it permitted and constructed, or are you just going and putting one up and you don't need to go out necessarily have an architect lay out walkways and parking lots and things of that nature, because it's oftentimes those are the hidden costs in building a greenhouse that go far beyond just simply comparing two material prices from a supplier. I would say that if, kind of in a hierarchy of things, your ground to grounds tend to be the least costly. And oftentimes those are farmer built, farmer constructed, or put together by your labor crews that you have for the summer. And then the next level up, I would say, would be, your gutter connected wholesale structures, probably your poly arches, your multi-peak poly arches, or polyethylene filmed structures, which oftentimes still get built by our customers and their labor crews. Sometimes they have H-2A visa folks there that they need to find some work for them the second half of their season. Once they're done shipping in the wholesale markets, they need to find some work for them for the second half. So they tend to use that same labor crew that's part of their their growing crew to put the structures up. And that, even though that's part of the cost of having you already had those guys factored in there for the whole summer, it's really still truly a cost of building the structure. You're taking that labor and you're applying it from one area to another. And it's not unusual on a wholesale project to see the labor costs almost as much as the materials. Then you start to get into retail, and the next level up, I'd say, would either be in terms of cost in total, would probably be your polycarbonate covered, rigid covered A-frame houses, or your Quonsets, or even your open roof style structures. Those kind of,
Paul, just a second, drop back on the labor and construction. I think you should mention that we get that our clients get a nice construction booklet along with details for the blueprints of the details for the structure itself also.
That's a good point. When you're looking at your suppliers, you ought to be asking them what for an example of what kind of drawings they provide. And I'll let Jeff talk a little bit more about this in the coming slides, but it's worth mentioning that we have an in-house design team that drafts all of our projects, in-house engineers that stamp the majority of our projects for us, and those two people working in conjunction, those two groups of people working in conjunction, are critical for being able to move a project through the building department if that's required, and even if that's not required, having good coordination of those drawings for the builders to be able to put together a project in a timely fashion with very few change orders and very few improper installations is critical. So I'll let Jeff kind of give an example in a few more slides of what that might look, what our process looks like. But getting back to the cost of the installers, there's also, let's just say you have to pay for an outside crew. Let's say you're a retail garden center and you only build or expand once in a generation or once or twice in a generation. It's not your daily business. You don't bring in a bunch of outside laborers, seasonal laborers to assist in these kind of projects. So you're going to probably reach out to a licensed builder. So the cost of the labor on a retail garden center, depending on whether you have a bunch of architectural features or not, sometimes could be 2-3 times the cost of the materials alone. So it's simply not just a matter of looking at the material bids from your different suppliers. You want to consider, are your laborers, is your labor force or your construction crew, your erection crew, are they licensed? Are they insured? Are they bonded? Do they meet OSHA standards? One of the nice things about working with our organization is when we do take on a lot of installation, and our crews are all meeting those standards of ours.
Going back to the one size fits all, which is a very important thing from each of your perspectives, we see it as there's certain areas that shouldn't have certain things. For example, like Paul, in your area, you say a glass greenhouse because of the heavy hail loads that come through. It wouldn't be very productive to have a glass greenhouse in your area. Do each of you have like perspectives on a house that works best for your regionality? Or what do you see that is more common in your areas? If you don't mind kind of filling us in on that. Jeff, you might have a different greenhouse structure that's different from what Jerry could have, and same with you, Paul. So.
I think we're all very different. I have heavy snow loads where I'm at, very, very heavy snow loads, and I'm pretty much in the hail capital of North America. So glass roofs are almost unseen out here. Some people do take the risk. They're looking for that appeal. We do a lot of glass frontages on our retail garden centers, as you see in these example photos here. But primarily because I'm in a slightly colder climate, we get down to -20 quite a few times a year here, -20 Fahrenheit, that is. And so we'll see a lot of twin wall and a lot of polyethylene. And a production range, it tends to be a Quonset style house, what we call our Grand Teton model, with a polyethylene film. Or if the customer is less inclined to have to replace that polyethylene every 3 to 4 years, because we're also high elevation, the UV has a pretty significant impact on it, you'll see them go into a more of an A-frame style, our workhorse, the Vail structure, with the twin wall. And I assume that, I'll let Jerry speak, but I assume that most of his customers are also probably looking at those two styles of structure, but I'll let him speak.
It had been polyethylene in my area for forever. And but we're finding that the clients are going to something a little bit more permanent now, for the simple reason that it is getting more and more difficult to find people to change out the polyethylene sheets, and that needs to be done every 4 or 5 years. Some people stretch it a little bit, but we're finding some transition into rigid covers in my area, but it's still a lot of double poly. A lot. And that's on our Quonset styles and our Gothic style Grand Tetons. Yeah. We don't want to put double poly on the Vail. No.
Jeff, what are you seeing?
Well, if you want to go to the next slide, that might be an example.
Next one, maybe even
Next
still.
one, maybe. Oh,
Next one still.
There. So again, where you want to build matters. If the call or email comes in and says, how much is a greenhouse? I know we have a long road to hoe. If the call comes in and says, Jeff, we are at this address and we'd like to do 12,000 square feet. Now we have a jumping off point where we can sketch out what you're talking about and hand it back to you, and then say, is this what you had in mind? And then go into estimating phase. But this is kind of an example of for engineered structures. The southern part of my territory gets by with 20 pounds per square foot of snow load. And that's usually like 12-foot truss and column spacing. In the middle part, we'd like to see 30-pound snow load, and that's like 10-foot bays, columns and trusses. I just did one on the northernmost part of my territory that needed 8-foot spacing. So from 12 to 8, there's where a price.
How heavy was that snow load up there in the northern part now?
So that the International Building Code wanted to see 70 pounds ground.
Wow.
Yeah, he's a few hours from Canada.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's very similar to what I deal with in my territory too, though, Jeff. I live in the mountain states, so we've built projects, I think probably up into the 85-pound snow loads. I've never seen anyone build a greenhouse in those kind of climates before. But I'm gonna go back a couple slides here because I just want to kind of demonstrate real quickly the variability of what we have as far as product offerings and why this kind of puts an easy explanation as to why there's not a one size fits all. So starting with this slide here, we have a bunch of retail photos, pretty high end stuff, mostly glass on the frontage, glass on the walls. They have a lot of systems within them, and shade systems and heating and cooling systems to maintain an ideal environment for retail year round. So these tend to be our most high end structures. Like I said, the rigid covered A-frames, open roofs, and Quonsets are very common to see in the retail space. And we'll talk a little bit more about the exact pricing of that a little further on. But this is an example of what we would see in the retail setting. And then we get into the production setting, which tends to be, the middle of the road in terms of cost. It all depends on the systems that they install within the structure. Whether there's be growing systems, irrigation controls, or systems that move plants around. the facility, transport plants around the facility. But you can see in the top two slides, we have an interior and exterior shot of one of our styles of ground to ground. These are our high tunnel styles, Gothic arch high tunnel. The model's called the Windjammer, and we build these all the way up to very high end CEA standards where they have full climate control. But they tend to be most commonly used as production and seasonal production. Sometimes as cold frames or sometimes as heated high tunnels. But, these things can go all the way from, I'd say, $5 to $6 a square foot, all the way up to, $18, $19, $20 a square foot, all depending on scale and equipment that goes in them. And then down below, you'll see an example of a high-end glass Venlo project, which is, Venlo is a style of multi-peak roof that's used primarily in the produce markets, but also oftentimes seen in the floriculture markets as well. And these structures, the structure themselves are very, 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 very cost efficient. Because we're usually building these at scale, well over an acre. So we have a lot of economies of scale with the manufacturing efficiencies, and also in our purchasing power for the different pieces of equipment and coverings that go into them. But once you start to put expensive systems into them, these end up being about the same price as a retail garden center oftentimes, because it depends on the type of growing that you're going to do in there, whether if you're floriculture, if you're growing on the ground with flood floors, or if you're produce and you're growing in gutters, a high wire crop or berries or something of that nature. So these can be very, very cost efficient structures that work in both the Windjammers and the Venlos. It comes down to what systems you want to put in them. That's for these two structures in particular, that's the driving price. And the top option you see here, the ground to grounds, like I said, more often than not, these are farmer built. If you're going to put a couple dozen of them and you don't have the labor, then of course, we come in and do that for you. But these are oftentimes they're designed, they're as close to a kit as we get. Yeah. And I'd say the same thing's kind of true about those Venlo structures down below too. They're pretty standardized, but these ones are not usually built by our customers. We typically come in and build these ourselves because we're building acres at a time.
Paul, the ground to grounds.
Yes.
That Windjammer you were just referring to, that's a non-coated structure.
In some cases, in other cases, in many cases, we don't. The Windjammer is definitely a non-coated structure. I'm sorry, I was thinking the Venlo. I was looking at the Venlo down below. That's a major difference between the price of these two structures too. When you talk about dollars per square foot, one of them is engineered to meet all the local building codes. That's the bottom one, the gutter connected structure, and the upper structure is, like I said, it's more of a kit. We've got them all over. You can see in the background we have mountains with snow on them. We've got them all over the country, but they're not designed to be. Sorry, they're not priced such that we have an engineer sitting in an office doing calculations on them. They're more designed for farmers to go put up quickly and cost effectively.
Correct.
Thank you so much.
We actually have a question that came in from Debbie. A very good question. Is the snow load ground snow, roof snow, or live load?
Great question. So those are all three built into our designs of a gutter connected engineered structure. So ground snow load sometimes can be reduced to a roof snow load. Some building departments allow for it and other ones don't. The roof snow load is usually 0.7 the ground snow load, but there are certain building departments that just say, hey, we're up here in the mountains or we're way up north and we're not going to allow you to take a deduction on this. The live loads are designed differently for different structures. And it depends on what kind of trusses we really have. And typically speaking, with our wide span structures, I think they're on the order of about 3 pounds a square foot, if I'm remembering correctly. I know that I've walked into many of our Vail style A-frames and seen 8 to 12 basket runs or an equivalent number of gutters being hung for a vine crop. And so
I've seen 5 pound snow load, live load, Paul.
5-pound live loads. And we had the ability to shift some of that too, right? Based off of whether there's a dead load or not there, right? So if we have if there's no dead load there, we can shift some of that around depending on the climate.
And it's important to know. I mean, everybody should go to their local municipality and find out, what the requirements are for their area.
And we're pretty much able to design towards anything. That's it. Just like I said, there's no two. Even though our Venlos might all look alike, for example, or our A-frames might all look alike, they have different size steel inside of them, different types of steel, different gauge steel, different strength steel, and so there's to this date, I have not seen a structure we cannot meet the demand for.
You just got to be careful. I mean, especially like say with the Windjammer being a non-code structure, it might not be ideal for a school, or something like that.
Exactly.
That might require occupancy. So you have to be careful with that to make sure that, you're following the local law of the land,
and that's a big difference in cost between retail or R&D, or schools or institutions versus wholesale. Is what risk category are they going to treat your structure as?
Yeah.
Typically an ag building is completely exempt, and then you have risk category 1 for most wholesale production. Risk category 1 meets the need, and then risk category 2 is usually designated for the general public, and so it means even though it's the same location as the greenhouse behind the property that's used for production, but you have you're doing retail on the front side of the property. That one now has to have higher snow and wind load ratings, which makes sense. It's all about life safety. And getting back to life safety, again, if you're going to have an architect involved, especially if you're on the retail side, you have an architect involved and you're going to have to pull permits. You might have to, these are some of the hidden costs you might have to take into consideration. Do you need fire suppression, for example? Is your structure, is what's been quoted for you sufficient to hold the fire sprinkler line systems that go inside there? We build almost all of our structures have that live dead load built into the framework to be able to support something like that down the road.
Either a dry or a wet system, Paul.
Dry or wet system. That's correct. That's correct. So these are there's a lot of good.
Jeff, I saw that you had a rendering that you had done on a project. Could we look at that for a minute and get your input?
Yeah, so here's a good example of 3 major steps in a project. The top left corner, after multiple good meetings with the customer, I gave them a 2-scale 3D model showing off all the elevations. And then once he said that's perfect, we go into estimating phase where we add all this up. And then he gets engineered blueprints as step 2. And then when we sign off on those, we can go to the shop and get it built, which is your top right corner. This one here is just under 10,000 square feet, 9,960, I think to be exact. This one had curb appeal design, which is front glass, powder coated steel, decorative knee wall. One of the interesting features about this one is the house next to the hardware store got upgrades to its roof purlins and trusses. When the greenhouse is a little bit lower than the building you are attaching to, it can become a bit of a snow trap. So our engineers account for that until the heaters can get that melted off. So you get a little better truss and purlin over there where we're connecting to a building taller than the gutter height.
So Jeff, how do you keep that common wall between the greenhouse and the existing building? How do you keep that dry? What's that process to flash from our greenhouse to their building?
So that gutter goes almost right up against that building with just a little room, less than a half inch of play. And then there's flashing, which attaches to our gutter and that building.
Oh, okay. Okay. So, would the builder, greenhouse builder, do that flashing, Jeff, or would that be up to someone else?
Typically, that decision's made on site. The best
Gotcha.
decisions are made on site when we get this far along.
I got you. Okay.
So this one here came in around $41 a square foot. The owner spent that again on remodeling that wall to the hardware store. Beautiful automatic sliding doors, parking lot improvement. And then there to the left of the left picture is another outdoor retail space for statuary and patio furniture. But the return on investment on this one is he's no longer seasonal. He no longer closes in June. This is year round. He goes right into house plants, and then pumpkins and corn stalks, and then right into Christmas trees and snow blowers. And so it's like adding 10,000 square feet to the hardware store, only it's got live action in the spring and summer.
What kind of shade system's in there, Jeff?
So that's a slope, flat slope, and then again slope, flat slope on the two houses. 50%. So it's got heat retention in the fall and winter and spring, and then 50% shade in the bright sunshine this time of year.
Nice.
What do they project that they'll save with that heat retention, Jeff?
I haven't got that calculation yet. Paul probably knows what we're usually.
There's a rule of thumb, and it's really a rough rule of thumb because it has everything to do with your climate, right? But they say that every time you add a curtain system into the structure, you almost double the R value of the roof. So, we do build structures, we do build projects that have 2 or sometimes even 3 curtain systems within them. And so, mind you, a lot of times those are glass roofs with an R value of like 1. But, we get up to maybe R value of 4 if all the screens, all the curtains are closed and they have a good seal. Comes down to the seal of the perimeter and how well it was installed too. That's a huge factor in how effective these curtains are. And there's also different types of curtains too. Some that have aluminum ribbons through them that help reduce radiative heat loss versus just your polyethylene or your plastic curtains basically that act as just more of a barrier, an air barrier. But this is a really great example, Jeff. You said somewhere on the order about $41 to $45 a square foot material cost, but you could see there's also a lot of hidden cost in putting one up, right? You said it's almost as much as what the materials were, but this is a very high end structure. We have glass on multiple walls. We've got, it looks like twin wall polycarbonate roofs with the atrium style roof vent that opens upward and outward like a chimney. And so this is a completely passive house. And sometimes, Jeff's way far up north, so he's able to get away with a passive house. His climate's very, maybe not this week, but very mild. Usually, usually very mild. Plus, it's got the curtain system in there that helps really cut down on the direct light that causes you to perceive the heat. So this has got it's got a pretty reputable control system too, if I had to guess. So some nice vents, glass, powder coated too, if I recall.
Powder coated.
Powder coat, that typically adds anywhere from 5 to 15% to a project. Just depends on how much we're going to powder coat. We can, if we're going to just powder coat the exterior glazing systems, which is most common, that's usually the best value added we could do in terms of value engineering. But then we have other projects, botanical gardens, universities, research institutes that want the entire structure powder coated. And, there's no such thing as the entire structure, but we get as much as we can.
This control system also had a neat little weather station where the weather station can feel the wind picking up and close those roof vents automatically.
Nice.
essential with a glass or with any kind of roof vent. Really, you want to have some protection.
Another question came through from Debbie. Is that a guillotine vent on the one sidewall?
I think it's
Yes,
an edge vent.
it's what we call our edge, exterior drop-down guillotine. Yep.
Awesome.
There's two of them with a sliding door in the middle to get out to the outdoor retail space. And
Now,
that's
Jeff,
showing on that photo on that drawing on the bottom right.
Jeff and Jerry, you guys are very effective at making these 3D renderings for your customers. How did the customers feel about seeing these? How effective is it for you at describing what the potentiality of their project could be? What's the process for you guys?
Well, it helps in many regards. One, it captures their vision, so just us, the salesman and the customer, but then it goes beyond that because when it becomes a project, the project manager gets to see exactly what we're doing here. I've had some of the customers also go to the city council meeting saying, this is what I want to do. If my neighbors sign off on it, are we good to go? And they love them.
Same thing here, Jeff. It's a visual, it's a picture. It's no longer a conceptual. It's now something that they can actually see. And I have the same reaction. We did a little small retail center in Maggie Valley, North Carolina, and I had this rendering like you did, and they took it down to the zoning. And we had the prints already, and the prints were stamped and that sort of thing. And they said, this is beautiful. Here you go. You're done. So it helps immensely. Yeah.
Keith, you want to go to the next one?
Yeah, absolutely.
So similar. We did the 3D rendering there on the left. There's a photo of what happened in the bottom right. Again, curb appeal, glass, powder coated, decorative knee wall. Some money savings with a polycarbonate roof versus a glass roof. So this one was a little smaller than the other one. This one was 6,600 square feet. So the price goes up. The smaller the package, the higher the square foot price because you're not spreading out the equipment costs over more square footage. So this one was closer to $45 a square foot for materials.
Which is pretty representative of both retail and I would say even kind of some of our R&D type of structures or high schools or our small institutional type of projects from a material only standpoint. Now, mind you, it's all about the building department you get and the architect that you're working with. Because if they start putting in a bunch of extraneous stuff, the turnkey cost of, the built cost of a project like this, especially on a smaller footprint, can sometimes be, 3-4x what the material cost would be.
Yeah. This one was rural Wisconsin. If this would have been like downtown Madison, I think we would have had to do a little more for those building inspectors. And it would have been a little higher price.
It's a shock how much of an impact the choice of architect and the building department that you're working with has on the cost of a project.
Yep.
Jeff, I know down in my area, a lot of sunlight, a lot of heat, that sort of thing. Any covering that I put on a structure now will be light diffusing, or be it glass, be it polycarbonate. You get some of that with your poly and that sort of thing now. Are you finding that to be the same in your area and Paul?
I've done sections of a greenhouse. They still want a clear roof for all the plant material. We've done some diffused or even opal to protect hard goods, packaging, furniture, from the RVs, from the sunlight. But for the most part, clear for me.
Gotcha.
I would say I'm a little bit more like you, Jerry. And again, it all depends on which market I'm selling into. If it's retail, I hardly build a retail anymore here in Colorado, Utah, or south of here. That's not a diffused polycarbonate roof. Typically twin wall. It's it's hotter. It's definitely hotter. You could drive around the countryside here in my territory and see houses that we built 20 or 30 years ago that were completely passive. And I'm actually moving away from passive houses quite a bit in my territory towards more mechanical ventilation with pad and fan, just because it's we have 10, 12 plus days a year over 100 degrees. And that, it wasn't like that 20 years ago when we built the older ones. And then I want to also comment a little bit. So again, if I'm doing wholesale, usually my solution there, because so much wholesale production is done in the winter and spring seasons, usually my approach there is a clear covering with a diffused shade curtain, automated diffused shade curtain underneath. But I do want to point out that Jeff mentioned about value engineering this project that we see here, this example we see, by putting the polycarbonate on the roof as opposed to glass. And that is 100% true when we're talking about small retail projects, smaller, like let's just say 5, 10, 20,000 square feet. At some point, there becomes a break, though, when we start talking about wholesale jobs where glass starts to look almost, price parity with polycarbonate. They both have aluminum glazing systems. Glass tends to have a little bit more aluminum, but when you get onto a massive scale, I'm talking 3-4 acre plus, the glass starts to shift back in favor of glass quite a bit.
We had another question just came over. It's actually a pretty good one. Over hard goods areas, do you use white, black, white, or what would you use?
I would use white, black, white, just to eliminate as much UV as possible. Keith.
I've done it many a times with white, black, white. Don't have much of a problem with that. Oftentimes the customers are trying to match their brick and mortar or their tilt up building. And so what we've done in the past there is we've sometimes matched the metal cladding that they use. So it kind of brings some continuity between the two different structures. And that's worked out real nice for us. Metal or white, black, white is very common though for the hard goods. Anything that's going to have a paper product underneath it, seed packets or cardboard boxes that different garden supplies might come in, or if you have if typically people aren't trying to sit on much inventory, they're trying to move it quickly. But if you end up having outdoor living accessories in the greenhouse space, then putting that underneath a section of non-transparent roof covering makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I usually go right to metal. You can get some decorative trim to match the company logo or something like that.
Absolutely, that's a nice thing about metals. We could flash in one color,
Yep.
and we could sheet in a different color and give it some texture.
Yep.
23 different colors that we can use and mix and match all of those. One of the other things that you could use your white, black, white for would be over your checkout area.
Yes, I do see a lot of, and also I see more and more these days. This is kind of not related to our structure, but I see more people putting up what do we call them here? Give me a second. What do we call that? Like a trellis structure, basically.
A pergola or a kiosk.
Pergola. Yeah, something like that. A lean-to pergola.
See it all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, a structure within a structure to make the the checkout counter person's life a little bit more comfortable.
Keith, you want to go to the next one?
Yeah, absolutely, Jeff.
So here's wholesale growing. This is our Zephyr. Got a unique shape to allow heat to go right up and out the roof vent. This one, double poly roof, polycarbonate sides with, again, natural ventilation. This came in at around $10 a square foot for materials. I think it went up for less than 20 a square foot.
Yeah, it all, again, the structures themselves are really not too high of a cost, especially if we don't have a whole bunch of motors and curtains and stuff. It's all about the systems that go inside of them. Once you start putting your basket lines in there or your flood floors, or your curtain systems for shading. That's oftentimes those components can be just as much as the structure, if not more.
Correct.
That's
The
certainly true for the Venlo structure.
Question just came over. Going back to that previous slide, how much does metal add to the cost percentage to a greenhouse?
Metal, well, that's really a scalability thing. That's a hard one to nail down there. Unfortunately, it's not. There's a lot of different ways that we could try to approach this here for you. There's a lot of different ways to put metal on the greenhouse structure. We could do an IMP panel, an insulated metal panel, which is a single integrated panel that has 2 layers of metal and insulation within.
Yeah.
And that's probably the most expensive approach, to be honest with you.
And you're looking, and Paul, you'd be looking at $12, $13 a square foot probably.
I think you're probably right when it comes to that. There's a lot of hidden costs in that type of system in terms of the caulking and attaching accessories and things of that nature. And we really only take that approach when we're building, let's just say in the produce market, we're building head houses that are coolers out of our structures. Or if we're doing a vernalization chamber, for example, for trees or perennials, and we need to I'm getting a little disturbance here from something here, microphone disturbance, and we need to really insulate that to meet our value. Or in some cases, in the retail space, we're having to meet energy code because they're putting offices, restrooms, things of that nature inside the metal building that we're providing. So then we might go with the IMP, but more often than not, our approach, it probably was Jeff's approach with the knee wall in this project here. As you see, there's a knee wall underneath the glass, is to put 2 single layers of metal sandwiched together with some insulation to basically make our own IMP panel. And it's slightly less R value, but in the case of, a true greenhouse, most 80% of the heat's leaving the roof, right? Not the sidewalls and the knee walls.
Another question. Besides just the greenhouses, do you see in the retail environment shade structures or outdoor nurseries or anything like that?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Go ahead, Jay. You do probably more than anyone.
Shade structures inside the greenhouse. And then what we have been doing that's working out really well, it would be ladder bar trusses with the flat shade on them. And then we can take those ladder bar trusses, and then if they need additional space, turn that into a covered area and just keep moving down the road. But yes, we see covered flat shade all the time, and we do it all the time. Yes.
And we could do retractable shade, automated, or stationary, which is grommets and bungees.
Awesome. I'm going to move on to that, back to R1.
We covered
one of the other things about this structure, Jeff has drop down curtains in where that vent is at the apex of that Zephyr house.
Mm-hmm.
But we can also put a mechanical vent that will open up from the bases of that vent out, also just like an atrium vent, if you're a single atrium vent on there, which would even let more heat out versus that drop down curtain.
Correct. And we've done Zephyrs for retail, and they get that nicer mechanical vent. In the case of acres and acres and acres of wholesale growing, they wanted the most economical roof system.
Most of our Zephyrs for retail are rigid covered.
Yep.
Either corrugated or twin wall polycarbonate. You can't put glass on this. Probably could, but we don't put glass on our Zephyrs. Versus a production setting where it's poly film. So I would say that the Zephyr. My experience is the Zephyr is anywhere from $15 to $30 a square foot, depending on what systems we put into it. We can on a large scale, we can get that cost down a little less. But if we're going to go into a smaller retail setting where it's going to be rigid cover, shade systems, maybe even a hybrid design where it's pad and fan along with passive ventilation, then they tend to go up a little bit more, and they start to look more and more like our A-frame, our Vail A-frames at some point there. And so I think if we don't have any more questions, we could start summarizing. Unless Jerry's got some other comments he wants to add.
Well, I just want to say thanks for everyone that's attending, and Paul is my boss man, so please give me favorable reviews because I really, really, really need to keep my job. But anyway, I think what you have seen throughout this is we can start low and we can end high. And I just did, and I found this very interesting. We just did a ground-to-ground windjammer for a guy in West Virginia, and it was a 30 by 120, and he built ground beds inside this ground-to-ground structure to stick for hard woody cuttings, and he is now selling product out of this structure and has sold product out of this structure to the Palace of Versailles. And
wow.
so that's we got George Washington selling them trees, and now we got Norm Cole selling them boxwoods. So I thought that was very interesting. But that whole that from beginning to end, structure, coverings, labor, MEPs, mechanical, electrical, plumbing. He had $65,000 in it.
On a 3,000 square foot house?
On a 3,000 square foot house. So that math
pretty cost effective.
Yeah, and it's very cost effective for him. He's doing exactly what he wants it to do. We sold him one last year. We sold him one this year, and he's already talking about buying another one because it's going so well. So, and we see this all the time that purchases become exponential. We start with a ground to ground, and then we build a few of those, and then all of a sudden, hey, look, we really need a lot of room, so we go to a gutter connect. Yeah. And we see that all the time, and we can get down to the nitty gritty with $6, $8, $10 a square foot, or we can go all the way to $75 a square foot for structure alone. So we have the capacity to do anything that you need to do. And if we went back to that one slide in particular, this Keith had mentioned it earlier. Most of the bottom chords are straight, but this particular customer in the top right photo wanted a curved bottom chord just to give him a higher cathedral look, if you will. So we have the capacity to do all those sorts of things, many widths and specific widths if you need it. So that's pretty much what I have. We hit on everything that I was going to mention, but we expect that we will be inundated with quotes that you people need for us to do for you. So we're ready, willing, and able to go about doing this, but we'll have a litany of questions, as you've already heard.
Yeah.
Permits, land, everything.
So this another question just came in about the windjammer. Can it be gutter connected?
Oh, absolutely. I did that down in the Charlotte area, and we put together, Keith and I put together a product that was 60,000 square feet, right, Keith?
Yep. And
but yes, they can, and we can modify it in a lot of different ways, and we use it, a lot of it, for nursery stock, and put roll up curtains on it and naturally ventilate it. And it's fairly inexpensive square footage.
It's a good introductory structure. Yes.
Yeah, but that windjammer is a nice little structure.
I think when you and I were looking at the last one, Jerry, now this was a large scale, completely passive, if I recall, just basically crop protection. I think we were looking at $6 a square on one of those large scale ranges.
That is correct. Yes, sir.
So, I just kind of put into summary here, again, the hierarchy from low to high in terms of cost tend to be your ground to grounds. Again, once you get to a certain scale, most people switch from ground to grounds to gutter connect for energy efficiency, labor efficiency reasons. But
And space savings.
and space savings, exactly. And space savings. Thanks for reminding me on that one. But I would say, the ground to grounds, $6 to $10 is not an unusual average to here, depending on the scale of the project. Then going up to the next level would be your gutter connect, most likely poly film structure. And those, they can range anywhere from, I would say, we were talking about earlier today here with the poly structure, about $15 to $20 a square foot, depending on the scale of it again. And then we go into the rigid structures, and those tend to be more your A-frames. You can still do Quonsets, you can still do Sawtooths or Zephyrline, or you can even be doing or even doing some kind of a multi-peak rigid structure. But those tend to be on the order, depending on the systems you put in. I'm talking primarily structure. They tend to be on the order of, I don't know, about $20 to $25 a square foot. So we're jumping up from 6 to 10, now 15 to 20, now 20 to 25. So we have one in each price range. And then you go into your Venlo style structures, and they're all glass, either your Venlo greenhouse, your open roof greenhouse, or maybe an all glass type of veil, depending on the equipment that we put in there. Those types of projects, 30 to 35, and there's no upper limit to any of these. FYI, we built jobs that are $150 a square foot for R&D that are completely sealed and HVAC. So that's not unusual to see. I'm just talking materials alone, and keep in mind, it's not unusual to see the built cost, or the cost of labor, I should say, equal the cost of the materials. So that's pretty common. And as you get smaller in scale, the built cost goes way up, because you still have to rent all the equipment. You still have to pay for all the engineers and the design team, but we're building a 10,000 square foot greenhouse versus a 5-acre greenhouse. So it's still the same amount of design work that goes into it, regardless of the scale, unfortunately. And your labor crews have to move. You have to come out there and they have to rent the equipment. Labor ends up being a lot more dollars per square foot on a smaller project than it does on a larger one. So the real price drivers to a project ends up really being the market that you're in, whether you're retail, wholesale, floriculture, nursery, or produce, the amount of engineering that goes into it, on our side, in terms of meeting codes for building permit requirements, and also all the other systems that you would have us put into it that we have to engineer and coordinate. The size, whether you're getting the economy of scale or not, the type of labor the labor that you're using, whether it's your labor, our labor, or some third party, whether you got GC involved, and then I'd say lastly, the systems that go into it. Those are the price drivers that I've seen. Watching, I can't tell you how many countless projects, hundreds and hundreds of projects, get built over the years.
We actually had a question came in from Noah, and I'm gonna probably take this one to make it a little easy. Can the Windjammer share posts for a gutter connected house? The Windjammer, for those of those who don't know, the ground posts are 2 1/4 inch, and then the bows themselves are 2 inch. When we do a gutter connect house, the minimum that we recommend for the sidewall height is 7'4". And a lot of people ask, why is there 4 inches, not just 7 foot? The answer is because if you want to have a door going out to the outside from the sidewall, we'll put a 4-inch header there. So that header accounts to make sure that you have room to have a full 7 foot height. But when the posts come down to the ground stakes for the gutters, there's actually 2 sets of stakes that are next to each other. And where those 2 stakes come together at the bow, that's where the gutter will go for the Windjammer. And so the poly will just lock into the gutter with a poly lock system, and that allows when we continue those stakes as double on the outside of the house too. That way, because the Windjammer is so versatile and it can be expanded later, you're able to add more gutter connects at a later time. If you want to start with 2 houses and maybe later you want to go 2, 3, or even more, you'll be able to just connect in with just the bows. So it's a very versatile house to get you going, but it's really strong. But we do recommend that when they are gutter connected, that the posts are set in concrete and they are heated so that they can take some of the heavier snow loads in different areas.
And we also have ways of reinforcing those structures.
Yes,
too, right?
yes, yeah. We have upgrades for trusses. We have upgrades for the gables. We have upgrades for knee braces. It's a very expandable, upgradable structure as far as strength and rigidity is concerned.
There's definitely a point though that we would, depending on how much systems you want to put into it, we might convert you over to a Teton or a different style structure. But the Windjammer is an amazing, very versatile product line. Highly regarded from the growers that we have that use them. And there's some people that don't ever plan on gutter connecting, and they have 50, 60, 70 of these things.
In the interest of time, Jeff, do you have any closing remarks?
No, Paul kind of summed it up. I mean, when you ask us how much a greenhouse costs, it's kind of up to you. Where do you want it, and what do you want in it? And we go from there.
Let's talk about your budget. Let's talk about your timeline. Let's talk about the crops that you're going to raise in there and how you're going to use the space,
Yep.
the expansion plans for down the road, and we'll try to guide you into the best structure for the best value that you're looking for.
Great, guys. This has been real helpful. Anybody out there? We got about another minute or two. If you have any questions, please feel free to enter them into the chat, and we'll be glad to answer them. So we'll give it. Very helpful. Thank you, gentlemen. This has been great.
If you continue to have questions that come to mind, here's our contact information for the three of us that were three minus Keith, unfortunately.
It's okay. It's okay.
The three of us that were otherwise here, and feel free to reach out to us. Again, I'd say our website's a pretty good resource too if you're interested in just educating yourself, www.prospient.com. And hope everyone has a great day.
Yes, thank you everybody for joining us.
Thank you.
Appreciate it very much. Just a little thing, if you wish to meet any of these fine gentlemen, Cultivate 24 is coming up in just a few short weeks. Our booth is in the same location. Everybody here will be there. A couple of your other sales reps that are not on this webinar today will be there as well. And we'll be glad to sit down and talk to you about your project and get you moving on for what your needs for your facility. With that, thank you very much. Have a great afternoon, what's left of it, and see you shortly.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.